Today we meet Sarah Haden Godwin from Active Gloucestershire, my hometown patch as it happens. Sarah works for the Active Partnership and has just been promoted to Director of People and Partnerships. Sarah is also a Churchill Fellowship Fellow and had the fortunate experience of studying how systems thinking was being utilised in Australia as part of her fellowship. Sarah wrote a fascinating paper translating systems thinking into practice to get communities physically active, and will take us through this, pulling out some key learnings, which is very apt considering Sport England are investing £250 million into places and whole systems thinking. As well as telling us about the many learnings she gleaned from her time in Oz, Sarah will share her thoughts on the sector more generally, and her in-depth knowledge makes for a compelling discussion. Please enjoy. Here we are again. Welcome, Sarah, to the Conveners podcast with myself, Andy King, and Mr. John Oxley.
Great to see you.
Lovely to see you, Sarah. So we'll kick straight off. So can you tell us a little bit about your day job as it stands now and your career history up to date? And maybe also think about physical activity and how that's played a role both sort of personally and professionally throughout your life so far.
Yeah, definitely. So, so I'm actually currently about to move into a new role at Active Gloucestershire as our Director of People and Partnerships, which would be a really, really exciting new venture for me there. So to lead our people and our external strategic relationships work, which I'm really looking forward to. To date, my work at Active Gloss has been as our lead of our place-based work, and also historically our health work. So I engage quite a lot with our local public health and our NHS colleagues around driving that work forward around physical inactivity in Gloucestershire. And previously to that, I was actually working in education. So I was part-time lecturing and also in sports development at Hartbury College, which is a very agricultural and sport-driven college in Gloucestershire. I've always wanted to work in physical activity and sport. I did a sport and exercise science degree, and I've always been an active person myself. The interesting thing around physical activity is the benefits it brings to you. I've had periods in my life where I've dipped out of activity for health reasons and other things, and so I think that gives me that unique perspective of the audience we're trying to reach around reducing inactivity. Things come in our lives which affects that, so being able to understand that can put you in the shoes of the people that we're trying to work with and support.
Excellent. What got you into? We talked with Beth on another episode who came from a very sporty background and is now connected with physical activity and health for those who are traditionally sort of underserved or have got long-term health conditions. And we were observing, how sometimes physical activity and health and sport are uncomfortable associates, really. And I was wondering, whether you came into physical activity through a sporting background.
Yeah, I think I was pushed into being active by my family. I think it's probably that, at the start of things, I have a very active family. So team sports was the way, and my uncle at one point wanted me to be the first Formula One female driver, which that didn't materialise. If you saw me driving, trust me, you'd know. But then it was really around, I've always had a passion for helping people. And I know that there's so many things in life, holistic well-being, that can help people, but because I was a sporty person, I wanted that to be the thing that I went into. And that was always the driver. So it was great. It was not just the physical benefits, it's the friendships that you create, and that social purpose that you get to pursue a career in that was great. It was also at the time I went to sort of university in sort of 2006, 2007. So it was also coming up to the London 2012 Olympics. So everything at the time was, 2012 legacy, everything's going to be great. So there was a lot of momentum in the sector then pushing you towards that kind of career path as well.
We ask our guests, who similarly, have done various things and got to a particular point. If you could sort of describe exactly what gets you out of bed in the morning now, and what's your real core purpose? What is the drive if you had to articulate that?
I think for me it's I want to spend my day knowing that I've helped at least one person, whether that be a colleague or whether that be someone as a result of the work that we do. My core purpose is always helping others, and it's always been that. I wouldn't be doing a job that I do and volunteer stuff that I do if it wasn't having an impact and helping somebody else. that's my core purpose, helping others.
Brilliant. What a daily great daily target. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I think
Micro
we could do little snippets of everybody's purpose, and the common thread from people from our sector is that it's something to do with helping people and serving people and stuff as that. It's probably no surprise to us, but I don't know, maybe it gets lost in the commercial world we all have to live in from time to time. I don't know as well. Right, Sarah, apart from your day job, which we're going to dive into a bit later, I came across your paper from the Churchill Fellowship. So would you mind explaining, first of all, a little bit about the Churchill Fellowship, but then get into your paper? It's fascinating.
Yeah, so the Churchill Fellowship is an exceptional organisation. It was previously the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, but they sort of rebranded it the last couple of years. And essentially it's a legacy organisation from Winston Churchill. And the main ethos is investing in people that will be future change makers, in travelling somewhere in the world to learn from great practice elsewhere, to bring that learning back to the UK and then to try and make a difference. So that's the core ethos, I guess, of the Churchill Fellowship. I applied for a fellowship back in 2019, which was obviously before the world changed a little bit. And we'd found it, the organisation that I worked with, our CEO at the time had heard about the Churchill Fellowship and signposted me towards it as a career and personal development opportunity. The work we were doing at the time within Active Gloucestershire, we were looking at how we could support improve physical inactivity levels at scale. We were looking at what was happening in the world that could be good practice for that. And one of the things that was taking place was some really great, interesting systems work in Australia as part of a World Health Organization program. And so my fellowship application was based on how can we translate systems thinking into working with communities and putting that in practice. So that was what my application was. And I was successfully awarded in 2020 to go to Melbourne and spend some time with Deakin University, who are world leaders in this sort of space. Obviously that was all put on hold, and I eventually undertook my fellowship in February and March 2023. So it's a bit of a wait.
You know what I have to say? Well done to the chief exec for not going themselves.
I know.
And allowing you to apply and go. So
I know. Yeah.
Well done you.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
well done to the chief exec.
Yeah, definitely. But it was a great experience, and you know, the Churchill Fellowship, there's fellows who've been invested in for years, and it's worth looking at because there's such a range of people that have had great experiences that are bringing stuff back into the UK.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us more about the project then that you did. What did you learn out there? What were the sort of the main key headlines? Because obviously systems leadership, systems approach now is the sort of the new thing on the block that everybody's trying to get into, and Sporting investing lots of money into it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, what are the main learnings, Sarah?
Yeah, so I think the thing that we were looking at differently, we'd been doing some systems sort of thinking and mapping work in the past, which lots of people have dabbled in. But what we realised was that was only showing us one thing, and that was a static system at the time that you look at it. There was some really interesting work going on over in Australia, and the purpose of there and what I observed was a very unique way of working that was bringing communities together to identify something that they wanted to improve in their local place. So it's something really, really, poignant to them. The approach was then something called group model building. So it's a very participatory way of extracting from communities what are the things that influence the thing that we want to change, the different factors that influence and interconnect. And it was all about co-building with communities a sort of causal loop diagram. And we've spoken about this stuff in the past. It comes within systems all the time. But the difference in this approach was communities come together and identify this stuff themselves. It's not a group of only leaders out having a conversation about doing to a community. It involves community members and community leaders as well. And that was the interesting thing. So I spent a lot of time in rural Australia, where they'd looked at childhood obesity and also things like reoffending of people that have been in prison, and also admissions into hospital, so reducing those. It was a range of things, and the experience was incredible to see communities building and owning solutions based on what they see as the interconnected pieces that are affecting things in the place that they live.
Yeah, fascinating. I've not come across this group model building until your report, to be honest, and I've not come across it since. Yeah. Is there any reason for that you can think of?
I don't know. So the thing that Deakin University do, they sort of coordinate a global community of learning in this type of approach. it's not being used too widely in the UK at the moment. There's a lot of different systems work happening here. But group model building, it's essentially a participatory approach to unpicking complex problems.
Right.
Which sounds jargony because it is, but they make it very inclusive and accessible.
Right.
So there's a lot of work going on in the USA and Canada, and also in sort of mainland Europe, but less so here.
Okay, so maybe something that we can learn a little bit more about.
Yeah.
I heard it. I mean, I think it's really interesting because my mind was thinking about we do some place-based stuff up in one of the areas that I'm responsible for at the moment, and one of the things about this thing about engaging with communities is fascinating, and it's interesting to hear it described in system speak, causal loops and things like that. But I was with one of our guys who works in partnership with us and is actually employed by Age Concern UK Stockport, and he said to me the most profound thing that I've heard in this year. He said, John, he said, when you engage with communities, they can tell you what they want, but they can't necessarily tell you what they need. I said, Danny, I said, can I nick that? And I think that's sort of what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of understanding, but it means that in order to get those communities to work, you have to immerse yourself in there for some time. Until you finally extract and things can work for them.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So since I came back, we've been piloting a couple of these approaches, and so the one has been with one of our integrated locality partnerships, so very much aligned to health outcomes, and that's been in a specific ward in Gloucester, looking at wider health and wellbeing of communities there. And the approach that you take is that you invite communities in to a session, a catch-up, a workshop, whatever you want to call it, depends on the community. And you essentially get them to tell their story of all the things that have happened in the past that could influence the thing you're trying to change. So you are straight away, you're involving them in what that means to them and what their perception of the past of this is and what they hope and fear for the future. And then you start mapping this out with them. Using a great bit of software that they've developed over an article called Sticky, which is systems thinking in communities knowledge exchange. Everyone loves an acronym. And what you do at the end, as you go through 3 sort of phases and stages, is you start to then layer in what's happening here and what's important to you in your place on this map. You layer in what's going on, what you need more of, and then you break this down essentially at the very end into action. So it's not just a map and then we hope that things will change, which they do sometimes just by bringing people together. But you actually then get the communities to think about, what actions do we need to do here, and who needs to be involved, and what do you need to make this a reality, and who needs to be involved in this to make this a reality. It goes then over into community ownership, and then what's the role in services or people with knowledge and expertise from outside of that place to come in and support.
But
it's
who
owned,
might not be in the room.
Exactly. But it has to be owned by that place, because otherwise you don't get the sustainability and the buy-in and the ownership of that.
So I suppose linking your day job with the Active Partnership and your studies, has that learning that you've gone off and got, has it been brought back other than in Active Gloucestershire? Are we all getting the benefit, or will we get the benefit of your experience going forward? Yeah,
definitely. So we've very much sort of tried to keep that learning to a safe, comfortable audience so far. So in our county, so we've been working with public health and our local authorities and our ICB, so Integrated Care Board, to really think about how do they want to think about us using this approach locally. So I've done some training with sort of some of our system partners locally, I guess, in how to apply the approach. Good. We've also been commissioned to support some partners where it doesn't align to physical activity. So in other areas, as a physical activity charity, we have to stay core to our purpose. So we've also done, a little bit of consultancy work in upskilling people. The ambition is to share this more widely if people want to try a different approach. There's no one size fits all or one approach that's perfect. But it might just be something different that somebody wanted to do. So training or communities of learning will be something I'd be really, really keen to help with across the network, not just in Gloucestershire.
That sounds good. I mean, and again, some of there are tenders out at the moment, as you well know, for some of this sort of learning to be taken up at scale at place, 80 to 100 places, and then the sort of universal offer and things like that. So I think whoever wins those tenders and gets involved, it'd be great to get that sort of learning and not let it go by the by, and help you take that to the nation.
Yeah, definitely. We work with Sport England already on a sort of older bit of place-based work, and some of the place piloting that we're doing is this approach.
Right.
So it'll be very much thinking about how we share that with those national partners that can help cascade that message. And also, you know, we have to remember there are experts over in Australia that have been doing this for a decade and more. It's also about when might we invite them to the party and bring their knowledge. They'll probably use very different words than me, but we're trying to make it UK relevant.
No, it's spot on. And it also reminds me of an earlier podcast we recorded today with a local councillor who's also on the board of the Active Wellbeing Society where we are today in Birmingham. And I mean, there's lots of lessons coming out of that one, but it was all about that sort of local community being engaged at a granular level and not dictating to them co-design, in spades, to be honest with you. So I think there's going to be a common theme, I think, of some of these discussions that we're having. It really is sort of that proper community engagement, not consultation, but proper community engagement being embedded in the community. So fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Another thought, I'll say, one of the things was this podcast is sponsored by Future Fit, who have been fantastic with us in Greater Manchester in looking at training needs and actually acting very swiftly with whether it's a digital platform or John leads our transformational leadership to actually try and get some of these learnings out there, if you like, in practical ways. So if you'd be up for it, it might be something we can talk to you about as well on those sides.
Yeah, definitely. Always happy to share with learning. We all like to hear different things. Sometimes we'll get these little light bulbs will spark, of interest in different things.
I mean, it's a fascinating approach, and the interesting thing is that, and it relates to the next thing that I'm going to ask, but the outcomes are derived as a consequence of storytelling. Yeah. And so much of our work tends to be derived as a consequence of pound, shillings and pence or numbers and it's all at a transactional level, isn't it? And there are different approaches that can lead to change. That's the thing. Just on I was interested in obviously your place-based working. Andy and I sadly have got our history is in facilities, and so and I think we all appreciate that improving the increasing the incidence of physical activity isn't necessarily derived just from facilities. But I was interested in your view about what role do you see leisure facilities playing in the future in terms of impacting population health?
Yeah, we have this kind of conversation quite a lot back at work about there's an old historic view that leisure is only for one type of person, and I think that's not a view that's necessary for moving forward. I think leisure is under such strain and pressure that it's very challenging for colleagues working in leisure to think about how they could engage with communities. I think they're a fundamental place to enable people that are already active to remain active, but also to think about how they could be genuinely reaching people that are less active and could benefit the most from moving more. My fear is that staff and wonderful colleagues working in leisure just don't have the time to be able to build relationships. And I think relationships and partnerships and being able to understand the people that you want to bring into your facilities or do some outreach for, if you can't have the time to build those relationships, it won't work. A lot of the time, a lot of partners and colleagues from across the network will talk about the work is often in the relationships and taking that time to get to know people and have that coffee with people. That is the work. It doesn't have to always be a service or an exercise on referral program. Yes, they're part of the work, but a core bit of the work is having the time to build the relationships and understand the needs of people as well. And I'm worried that leisure doesn't have that time at the moment, but hopefully moving forward it would, because they're a fundamental piece of the puzzle. There's not just a one size and one solution. They're a core piece of the puzzle for me then.
Yeah. And following on from that, I mean, that's a really strong statement and very profound and relevant just now. What are the things that need to change then in order that we can create the opportunity for them to play a more purposeful role, and they do have that time and they do recognise the value in creating rapport, building relationships and then getting trust, which eventually leads to change?
Yeah, we were actually only in a meeting yesterday with a lot of leisure partners talking about their issues at the moment around their sort of grassroots entry-level jobs, should we say, and about the fact that at the moment some of their staff that may be able to build these relationships are having to backfill and take on shifts that they've not done for years. And I think it's a drastically underfunded and under-resourced part of our sector, and it makes me sad that if we don't invest in to free up the time to build relationships, we risk losing a fundamental part of our DNA within sport and physical activity that is leisure. At the same time, I do wonder whether locally in Gloucestershire we have some great relationships with our leisure partners.
GL1 closed, didn't it?
It did, absolutely, and know that there's many reasons that I probably won't go into now now for that. But actually what happened with GL1 was then the community response was incredible. The community really kicked back around this is a valuable asset, and I think we hadn't realised what we got until it was gone.
Absolutely.
And then the power of the community really forced, I guess, the council's hand in thinking about we need a quick fix for this.
Correct.
Now's a new temporary leisure operator in there, and hopefully that will show where the money needs to come from to make our leisure sector thrive again.
It's a good example actually in a number of ways, and it does remind me a couple of weeks ago, a few of us from Alliance Leisure actually, not from Alliance Leisure, but Alliance Leisure got a few of us together down to go and see Warren Smythe down in Abercroft Leisure, and we heard exactly that from Warren, and actually from his commissioner, who came along to give his perspective as well. And the key thing was relationships, and that Warren was visible. Warren was in meetings, and the feeling was that elsewhere, particularly if you perhaps got a contract manager type relationship, they wouldn't be allowed that time to actually go and build those relationships and be in those rooms. So, and that's all about resources and things like that. So you're right. And I guess the answer that we discussed down in with Abercroft and Warren and his team was about collaboration, effective collaboration, and having trust. So if they couldn't be in the room, that they knew that somebody would be, and that they wouldn't be kept in the dark, and that sort of partnership. Do you see that working in Gloucestershire, for example? Is that something that's embryonic, or is it sort of fully fledged, or where is it on that sort of continuum?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely somewhere in the middle. There are certain parts of our leisure sort of sector locally that are working a lot in collaboration and have that time. There are also a few independent sort of leisure, more smaller independent leisure operators that can give themselves a little bit of that time and that flex. And you see that actually what you end up with is a far more community owned. In fact, we actually even have a sort of a community owned leisure site in one of our districts. So you can see the power of collaboration can mean that leisure can meet the needs of its local community. I guess the potential issue is you've got some real big players in the leisure sort of servicing of leisure, resourcing of leisure locally. The models that maybe they operate at the moment is quite traditional and doesn't allow for that. However, I think in the future they will have to change, because otherwise we will see closures, and we will see, it then becomes a huge Sport England issue around the fact if we will see inactivity rates increase because people will dip out of activity that are currently accessing things.
Yeah. So do you feel there's a sector, so it'd be interesting, just it's really an opinion, a wider opinion. Do you think that there's the clarity of purpose for the sort of sport and physical activity sector at the moment, or is it a bit muddled? Where do you think?
I think the sector is widely misunderstood as the value it can add to wider society. I think it's getting better. I think it's been misunderstood for some time. My personal opinion is just that strategy, national strategy and local strategy is shifted in the right direction, but it probably needs a little bit more of a risk taken, let's say, and let's really push on to reprofile the role of sport physical activity. I've got a real passion myself in sectors not standing alone. So we're trying to do much more around engaging with the arts and culture side of life. Thinking about people's well-being and how they want to live their lives isn't just, I'm just going to do sport, I'm just going to do arts. They intersect. And so, for sectors to come together in genuine partnerships that mean something is, for me, the way forward. And see the value that each part of different sectors can add is huge. So I think that's the way forward, of breaking down those barriers and those misconceptions sometimes with sport and physical activity and leisure.
Which is the very nature of systems leadership, doesn't it? And I guess the challenge is, and sort of my question would be, what is it that we can, what role is the active partnership playing in trying to facilitate that deeper collaboration across the system?
Yeah, I think obviously every active partnership is very different in the way that they operate. We, for some time now, definitely for the last 6-7 years, have been looking at wider collaborations and almost thinking about health and well-being rather than just sport and physical activity, and so repositioning ourselves, being in the right conversations at the right time, and taking sport and physical activity off the table and off the agenda a lot of the time. That works really well because you're not going with an agenda, you're actually just going as being part of something. We want a county where people in Gloucestershire are living well, they're happy, they're healthy. That's our sort of main strategic objective as an organisation, and that enables us to be in conversations and in room with partners from a range of sectors and be part of the systemic solution rather than just a little tiny piece over here. It gives us that freedom and flexibility.
I love the thought of working with culture, and I know John does as well. I used to be the chief exec of Your Trust in Rochdale, and we were lucky enough to have culture in our sort of portfolio as well, and we got to the point of saying, actually, when we managed to bring it all together, we used to say that's where the magic happens, when we can bring the culture side alongside, because people are people. They're not. We tend to pigeonhole them, don't we? And actually, it's just particularly children can benefit from all of the physical activity, all of the cultural activities alongside it. In Gloucestershire, my home, as you know, what have you managed to do with culture, just out of interest? Is there something we can learn from there?
Yeah. So we've done a little bit more work in Gloucester with our sort of Gloucester sort of culture trust. We've done a little bit around working with them for things like active streets and things. So in Gloucester at the moment, in particular, anyone that's been there will see there's street art popping up everywhere, and beautiful painted houses and communal gardens and nature pathways. So we've done quite a lot around showcasing the environment that we all live in through a range of ways. Culture as well, locally in Gloucester, has had some investments around place-based working, which we know is the new thing, because we know certain areas need a little bit more support than others. And so again, that's an opportunity for us to align with the culture sector, because we also have some place-based priority working within Gloucester. So if you do those two things in isolation, it's it won't be as effective. So again, that's a real opportunity now for us to work better as a combined sector for wider wellbeing and purpose.
And quite often you're targeting the same places.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all, of course, like I mentioned, some areas do need a little bit more support in a more targeted way for them. And it's about working with that area so that you're not constantly dropping something into a place and hoping for the best. It's really around understanding those areas a little bit more. And I guess with the culture investment and also, potentially the Sport England investment, what that enables is the time and the resource to work with a place, to really understand it and be embedded, like we said earlier. Not just have a national programme and drop it in and hope for the best.
Absolutely. So where are you with the funding from Sport England? Do you have clarity on where as yet, or not?
No, not yet. We had some previous place-based and sort of priority place investment from Sport England, which is sort of still in its later stages, and so we're in conversations at the moment. Obviously, we're still part of a lot of conversations with other partners across the country. I think what's really important is this big investment is great, and it will really, really reach people across the nation that need it the most. However, areas that don't get that investment, we still need to be thinking about taking this type of approach and thinking about how we can maximise our resources collectively and our learning, which is huge, which is why this is so important. So that actually we can shift the way that we work to be able to work in the way that's right for the people in our counties.
And is that something that you agree with? That I know you've got to be careful what you say, but the whole system's opposed to place-based approach, does that really excite you? Is that if you had that 250 million, would you be spending that in that way, or was there something you think, I just wish they'd do this slightly differently? A big question to and I know you've got to be diplomatic, but anything there that you could that comes to mind?
I think it's a lot of money, and of course, nationally, they will need to be very, very cautious to where this investment goes. I do have a thing that areas of greatest need probably do need a little bit of a different way of working, whether that's more investment or just a different way of working. It depends how you look at this.
Yeah.
I also agree that this more universal offer is really, really needed. It would be great when there's clarity on that. I think we all just need to shift a little the way that we're working in a way that's right for where we work. So I do agree with the investment approach, but I hope for the future that it will mean greater learning cultures emerge from across our sector rather than isolated, siloed thinking and protection of what we're doing. Because ultimately, if you take something that works really well somewhere, you can't just drop that, but you can learn from that and think about how to apply that in your area.
Okay. Sorry, is that okay? Don't hold back on being controversial. That's why we do this.
You've got my name. I don't want to do that.
Andy and I have got less to lose. So, so I was really interested in what you were saying there, Sarah, because it strikes me that these shifts in approach require a belief in a different type of leadership as well. And so I wondered what your view was on the state of leadership capability and leadership capacity in order to recognise the merits in making those really quite nuanced but very profound shifts.
Yeah, I think that is probably what needs to sit at the heart of the changes, is around investment in leadership. I think, there are a range of different people and experts across the country that are doing some great stuff, but it's being done quite small scale at the moment. I hope that with the future place-based work that's happening, and hopefully not even just in the physical activity sector, that actually there is almost a bit more of a collective leadership approach, that's then cascaded down into the areas that have that resource. As I mentioned, with our county, we had there's investment into place-based working from other sectors. Again, it would, to me, be silly to not combine thinking about that wider leadership of our place and not do that in isolation of, say, culture and sport and physical activity separately, because they're the same people around the table, which is why every area in the country is going to be so different, because the makeup will be very, very different and the investment will be very different. But the way that we can think about how our leadership is buying in and then thinking about the decisions that they're making in the future, that's what will lead to sustainable change long term beyond investment. Investment will only get you so far. If you can change culture and leadership models and ways of thinking, that means that the future will be far, far, far brighter.
Yeah. One of the things we've done in Greater Manchester with John's help, he leads the whole thing for us, is taking the sort of whole systems approach and leadership generally, and actually think, well, what's that mean for our leisure centres, so that they're not left over here somewhere. So I guess in the past you could have active partnerships and others doing whole systems approach place-based, and the leisure centres are just doing what they always have done. We've tried to address that. Are you conscious of that? Is that something in Gloucestershire you'll be working on too?
Yeah, we've spoken very much around, if we it always there's a little bit that does come down to investment, because you need investment to free up resource and capacity sometimes. Something that we're passionate about is if we can have in our county resource to free up people that could have, say, floating roles within different organisations that be valued in those organisations, for example, leisure, for example, local authority. It doesn't then add to the daily to-do job of people already in those overstretched roles. But how can somebody be, in job shares or placed within to be able to influence and to be able to learn and understand and feedback? That's what we're thinking about locally, because we see that's a way of allowing to influence through the sector without needing to add to incredibly stretched people, passionate but stretched people.
Excellent. And I guess some of that will play again nice when you know what your investment is. It might be that you can create a plan that sort of covers some of that off and almost create those connecting roles to bring things together. Because some of the stuff with the Sport England funding, as I understand it, is, again, it's not dictating what a place needs, it's understanding what the place needs and then build the budget to suit. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think an active partnership has a really, really unique role in the fact that we can be very impartial around the needs of our county. So, we're able to bring partners around the table from from across our local system, and then produce almost a collective notion as to what we need. And it needs to be fully combined effort of thinking of need versus what the future of that is, because like I said, investment gets you so far, but if while you're having investment you're not creating the foundations for longer term sustainability, it's almost been a waste of time.
So in terms of the operators then in Gloucestershire, what's your relationship like? Is it sort of fully fledged? Are you on the same page? We often say in GM that with GM moving with Hayley and the team and all the rest of it, I use probably a totally unsuitable term, and you couldn't get a fag paper between us. What's your relationship like?
Yeah, so it's quite good. It's quite good. We have a real range of operators locally. We also have one that's a couple that are sort of local authority led. So we have a sort of a governance structure in place already with the work that we do, where some of those operators and local authorities are part of the decision making that we do as an active partnership. So it enables us to understand what's going on in their world, and also be able to think about the decisions that we make with what we have, how it can affect those. So we're in a good place. It could be better, but in other areas I'm sure it's much more complicated.
Yes.
I mean, we also have the issue of like many areas in the country we have two sort of urban hotspots of Cheltenham and Gloucester, which are quite well resourced within leisure land, I guess, for want of a better phrase. And then some of our rural areas are so, rural isolation is a real issue for some of our areas of the county, and accessing leisure is extremely difficult for many people out in those areas. And again, some of the lessons I'm thinking now of TAF, who have done some fantastic stuff up in Pennine and Lancashire, working with farmers and young farmers organisations, and probably not the norm that we think of, the type of proper systems approach, identifying where are these people that are, let's say, hard to reach, difficult to reach, tricky to reach, whatever, and they find the organisations, and they've done some amazing work, and they are very good at sharing this as well. But I still wonder how many people actually know about some of those case studies and can pick out that learning. So again, we're back to that collaboration on a national scale and getting that learning. I think TAF is a great example, and it's definitely the resources that they put out on their case studies are things that we look at all the time, because actually they're not afraid to paint the picture as true, I guess. We as an organisation, we don't like it, but we love to dabble in what doesn't work just as much as we do what does, because you learn so much when things don't go right or as you expected, and a lot of people don't always say about that kind of stuff, but we think there's nothing more to learning actually than understanding maybe why things didn't go well versus why they do.
I mean, there's two things that you've mentioned just recently there that are going back to this leadership thing. There are key modern and system leadership traits. One is influence, and that's a skill in itself. How to influence and how to communicate and collaborate, build relationships. And I've just forgotten what you just said.
I've said about fail, like not afraid to get it wrong.
Humility.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be interested actually. That's the bit. Just not getting things wrong. And I think historically or traditionally, the leisure sector hasn't demonstrated humility. It loves to. It's full of characters who like to slap each other on the back, and go rah rah, and aren't we great? And I just feel that in order to shift things along, we have to be prepared to just demonstrate a little bit more humility and consider what we haven't done quite so well, and face up to it and confront it in a way that you just described. I'd be interested in what your thoughts are on that, what evidence you see of that, really.
Yeah, I think we've worked with leisure operators in the past around they sometimes will offer to run things and nobody turns up, and it's that stubbornness of, but we committed to this, so therefore we must continue. And around then not being able to think about, well, why doesn't this work, and why don't people access, and why do we only ever get the same people? And that probably goes back to a bit of the conversation earlier on as well, and around if you only know what you know and you only do what you do, you're always going to get the same things. So it all goes hand in hand.
Lots of key skills. Again, these are really important things. This is what, how do we build capability and capacity and understanding of those types of things? And it's developing this learning about stuff. And often, we need to look upstream more, which is another sort of system concept, isn't it? But trying to put those thoughts and that learning into people's mind to think, we have to do more of that, and that will enable us to become better, to think broader, to be able to look at things from other people's perspectives, and that's that's something I'd be interested to know whether you talked about this understanding and this sort of getting different people's perspectives and pulling partners together. How many of the venue managers, facility managers in Gloucestershire know what the Active Partnership is and does? That's one of my controversial questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's also a bit of another issue around the turnover of, so there's often a lot of churn in that sector. So maintaining those relationships can be really complex. We have a relationship with quite a lot of those, to be honest, but they're always changing. And a lot of the time, it's not about us as the Active Partnership. Sometimes we very much also think about how we are building capacity across our districts. Who may hold those relationships themselves, because even in Gloucestershire, each place is so different. And so, we have a great position of being able to, I guess, a bird's eye view, a dance floor, a balcony view of the dance floor, should we say? More systems talk. But again, sometimes it's down to the role of our district partners, because they will be the ones that might be better to hold some of those influential relationships than us. So it's when's the right time to step away and when's the right time to step in.
I think it just goes to show, I think, piecing all that together, the investment that Sport England is about to make and is beginning to make now seems the right thing. It seems to be going to the right areas, and the sort of thrust behind it sounds like it's the right thing to do. We just got to hope it works, and we build and collaborate effectively, and where it is working, we really learn that. But your point, Sarah, where it isn't working, why? And share that learning. So let's hope that works. Right, we're on to the quick fire questions now, to finish off. Getting a little bit political now. Why not? So the first one is, what one thing would you wish an incoming new government to do in relation to what we've talked about?
So I would hope that there was a big shift towards prevention. If you think about health in particular, so obviously outside our sector, but very, very linked. Prevention. We're a country that's getting older. We're living for longer. We have to be thinking about health behaviours, and prevention and physical activity and sport for me is one of those core ones. So I would like to see definitely no reduction, but significant investment in prevention of healthy behaviours across the system, not just in sport physical activity.
Absolutely, 100%.
Paradox question from me. What excites you about the opportunities in the future, and what might you also be fearful of? So I what excites me is actually the diverse nature of our of the UK, the diversity of thought and opinion, and growing emerging areas of, say, leadership and systems working and behaviour science. So all those things, but in a very accessible community lens, and harnessing the power of diverse thought and people to make genuine change. That really excites me. Did you ask about what scares me as well? Yeah, what might you be fearful?
What I'm fearful of is cuts of things that matter the most to people, and the over-reliance on the voluntary sector to pick up pieces where services get cut and being stretched to the point of the risk of that sector also, falling on its face at some point in the future. Worries me.
Yeah, particularly when money might be channeled to other causes that the government are grappling with at the moment and the world's grappling with. And the final quick fire, Sarah, before we ask you to think of somebody you might want to recommend to come on the Conveners, is we're currently in the DCMS as a sector. Do you think that's the right place, or would we perhaps be better in health, and particularly OHID?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. I think I said about prevention, didn't I? So I think we would be better positioned a little bit more within health and OHID, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or somehow a more transparent link between the two.
Yes.
It would probably be the ideal.
Yeah. And Kim Ledbetter from from the Labour government is saying that it's got to be owned by more than just one department anyway. But so yeah, maybe it's a bit more complex than I'm making out. So you're only allowed one, but because I'm sure you can name a number of people. But who might you recommend we get on the Conveners to talk about this a little bit more, please?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to come from a different lens probably, and more around demonstrating impact and thinking about how to show change. There's a great guy called James Nobles who's a researcher in sort of ripple effect mapping and systems approaches. Right. And I think he's great at thinking about how we can show change that happens over time through a systems lens, through the ripples and the why and how complex things can change over time.
Excellent. Sarah, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brilliant.